Hello and welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. The seagulls unfortunately soared and a table may have been kicked in my living room yesterday afternoon like a petulant child, but I'm still here, listeners, viewers. Welcome to the show. As always, my name is Rory. I'm joined by my very good friend, Adam.
And
a special guest. We have Dev Bajwa. I hope I said that right. Bajwa.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Dev Bajwa,
you, yeah.
perfect. Manchester United fan, Milan fan, and author of The Conquerors. We are going to get onto that as well. Welcome to the show, Dev. How are we doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm much better than I was about a week ago. So I'm glad that because I know we tried to do one about 2 weeks before that, the run up to the first leg. And then I strategically made sure that, we were in a good spot before coming on. But yeah, thanks for having me as well. I know we've spoken a lot on Twitter, but yeah, looking forward to the chat.
Beautiful. Great to have you on. And Adam, how are you doing, man? Good weekend, bad weekend?
Yeah, good weekend. For once, Rory, I was able to get those shorts out, and knock out those knees in the sunlight of the UK for the first time. It felt like summer. So I'm sure you've done that many a time in Milan already. But yeah, it was nice to actually get them out and get some air down there. So that's the most important thing.
It's important,
yeah,
it's a sign of the times.
It was beautiful, nonetheless. But more importantly, mate, how are you? Because you seem to have a good time in Milan.
Yeah, I did actually meet a friend of the show, shout out, AFC Finners. Him and his friend Ewan were in Milan for the weekend. They've been in Como today, visiting the stadium. The funny story, they were supposed to be in Milan for Inter Sassuolo, right? And they bought tickets and then they changed classic Serie A FIGC. They changed the kickoff time. So they were flying when the game was on. But do not worry, I bought the tickets off Finley and sat there in his place, drank plenty of beer and had a great time. So thank you again, Finley. Nice. It's great to see you in Milan and enjoyed an absolute goal fest. It wasn't a great start, but it was good towards the end. But listeners, viewers, we've got a lot to cover in this show. In the Premier League, we are, of course, going to talk about what is the death of the title race as Arsenal whimper out against an incredible Brighton at home. We're going to be talking about Manchester United. We're going to be talking about Aston Villa against Spurs. We're going to be giving Big Sam some love. I think we're seeing a bit of an upturn there. Adam, what are we going to be talking about in Serie A? There's plenty to cover as well.
There is. I mean, if we start off with last night's result, which was Juventus versus Cremonese, there's only one talking point, and that was the return of Paul Pogba, but it only lasted 21 minutes. So I'm sure Dev will be enjoying those 21 minutes to reminisce about that. And then we'll also talk about both Milan clubs. So as you alluded to, Inter, fantastic result, it has to be said, although it was a bit of squeaky bum after about half an hour to go of the last 30. But then also Milan and the Curva, we'll also talk about that. And I'll allude to Lazio and Lecce because we're talking about Spezia. We're talking about the relegation fight at the bottom. It's definitely getting a bit more fascinating. Obviously, Hellas Verona kind of screwed their chances, but Lecce kind of got an important point in Rome. It has to be said. It could have been all three, but we'll talk about this and more, Rory.
Beautiful. Well, viewers, listeners, we are going to go for a very, very quick break, and we will see you after this. And here we are. It's time for the Premier League review. Adam, I'm going to let you decide which... No, actually, Dev is the guest. Dev, where do you want to start off? Which game are we going to start with?
Because you've invited me, so I can't be rude and just go straight into
Feel free, honestly.
No, I think let's talk about United, only because it's going to be a quick one compared to some of the others. So let's get through them. But I think, it was a bit squeaky bum compared to how it had been for the past 2 months, I think, at United. We sort of assumed, with games against West Ham and the likes of, I think Fulham we've got later on, and like Wolves, we expected quite a nice run-in compared to what it could have been. Brighton was obviously a bit of a difficult one away from home, but to not only drop points but to lose both away games at West Ham and at Brighton, one to a really, I mean, you say it's an unlucky last-minute penalty. They battered us the whole game. That wasn't really an issue, but it was sort of now where we're going to see us tail off and sort of get out of top four, because that, even though at the beginning of the season we would have snapped your hand off for where we are now, we still would have seen it as quite a massive downshift from where we were. But to get a clean sheet and for David De Gea, of all people, to win Golden Glove for the season.
Just chef's kiss. I've got a lot of time for that, to be honest.
It's so stupid, and he's not gonna leave, but he'll probably be second string, I hope, next season. But to get that and to still have all the losses that we've had and not have one of the best home forms in the league. I think it's 8 goals conceded in the league this year, which is pretty astonishing. 1 loss, I think, which was the first one against Brighton. But yeah, I think we've had. Very good, yeah. But no, we've had a brilliant season, to be honest. If we can sustain the top 4 charge and keep it, and then if we can try and get something at the FA Cup, I've sort of resigned us to not getting it. But if we can, then that'll be astonishing. But right now, Ten Hag has already laid the groundworks for next season. We've heard some transfer talk coming up about Kim Min-jae from Napoli, of course. So let's hope that materializes. Yeah. But if there was anything to come out of that game at the weekend, it was start to finish, we battered them. I don't think they really had a shot on us. I don't think they had a shot on target, actually. And we were by far the better team, which after 2 straight losses, I would have bitten your hand off, and I'm gonna bite your hand off. So yeah, we've done very well, and I'm proud as a United fan right now. Let's just hope we can stick to it to the end of the season, really.
I think it is a good win. I don't know if you agree, Adam, because Wolves have been they've been inconsistent, but they've been improving a lot since Lopetegui came in. We've complimented them on how they replaced him pre-World Cup, gave him that time on the training field, and it has absolutely saved, because it looked like they were going down. So I think it is a big win for United. How did you feel about it, Adam? Do you think United will get top 4? I'm going to ask you a question, Dev, in a minute. I've got one question to ask, but what do you think, Adam, about United's chances?
I would have said before this match, I kind of fancy Liverpool because of the momentum they've got at the moment. But at the same time, you kind of start to see Newcastle falter a bit as well. So they're not being the consistent selves as they demonstrated the last few games as well. So up until that Arsenal game where they kind of lost that kind of mentality in terms of the way they've been approaching games. Certainly it feels like Eddie Howe's turned the other way, but focusing on United, it's weird, isn't it? You just don't know which side's going to turn up sometimes. And I have to say, I agree with Dev on this one. I thought they were really good. And if it wasn't for Daniel Bensley, he kind of frustrated Man United on numerous occasions with the amount of saves he pulled out. I mean, this is a guy that was playing his trade in the Championship prior to this. So for him to come out and kind of demonstrate this kind of performance was incredible. But like Dev said, it wasn't really much of a game because Wolves kind of handed it on the plate at times. They made it so easy. And the likes of Ruben Neves as well, he kind of was making so many mistakes. It's not the kind of characteristic kind of Wolves side that we've been used to seeing in the last few games. So yeah, I think that's the side that I think was kind of a nice kind of game for Man United to have, especially with the run up, as they've alluded to. I think also injuries was played a part. So it's getting confidence in the players like Martial. I know we don't really
who
rate
my question's
going
to be about. I'll be honest.
I'll let you ask that question now. Go on. No, I feel that that's the right side.
Obviously, it was put on a plate for Martial, right? It was very nice work from Anthony to give it to him. But do you think that Eric can actually coach Martial into the striker that you need him to be, or do you expect him to leave this summer? I find him one of the most confusing footballers of all time, Anthony Martial.
Yeah, I think he's done, personally. If I was Eric, I would get rid of Anthony Martial. It was only because there's a few quotes that I've seen recently which kind of changed my mind on him. And it was, we kind of can't, as United fans, we seem to keep remembering the very first Martial that came, which is completely different to the one now. If anything, the one now is probably better technically. He's probably got more strength about him. His hold-up plays better. His link-up plays better. He's already got a few assists this season, some key ones as well. So he has, he's not been a bad player by any stretch of the imagination. But after 6 years at United, for us to still be like, we're not sure about our central number 9, you can't ignore it. And, there's a couple of years where I'll forgive because of injuries and because of, he switched to the left when we gave him the number 11 and we brought him back after, I think, Ibra left. So, there's been a lot of change with him, but I'm sure about Rashford. I'm sure about even Anthony. I'm sure about Sancho even, because I think he needs to step up. But I think there's a player there. But Martial, I'm so unsure. And after 6 years, 50 odd million quid and all that promise. I just think he's going to have to go down as a good player because he has, you look at his figures, they're good. He's a good striker, but I think for where we need to be, either demote him to a second string striker, which can you do that when he wears the number 9? I don't know, but we need to get, I would go for 2 young strikers rather than one big one, because I think we need to future-proof the squad. But looking at Martial's injury record this year and his performances when we actually need him, it's not been good enough. And I think Ten Hag knows that. Like he's very good at phasing players out. We have an 80 million quid captain that he doesn't play.
That's very true. That's
like
very
true. Even with Varane and Martinez out for the long stretch, and he played Luke Shaw there instead of Maguire, and we did really well. So people think the Ronaldo thing was ages ago. That was this season, and it feels like it was so long ago. But he's dealt with a lot, and I think Ten Hag is one of them. He'll happily look at what's going on, and if the takeover stuff is to be believed, then of course we can move forward as a club. But as of right now, I don't think Martial fits into our long-term plan. No.
Yeah, I kind of got that feeling. I'm not sure what type of player he is or what just what he is. But it was kind of nice to see him back on the score sheet and remind, he's still there. Good work. But I think I've delayed the inevitable for long enough. Maybe it's time to talk about Arsenal. I don't know. Is it time to talk about Arsenal now, Adam?
Let's do
it. Balls. That was horrible. Honestly, that was just horrible. I don't know what was worse, watching the game or listening to Gary Neville's commentary. I'm still trying to decide which one was worse. Obviously, Brighton were the much better team. They were the much better team. They dominated the ball. We did not show up. I still think first half, we had the better chances. I was watching the first half, and I think we gave away possession too much and just allowed them to have the ball, but we did have the better chances. I thought, okay, we can maybe sneak out of here with something. Now, the first goal, I'm really pissed off at Kivior. I'm sorry, Adam. I'm really pissed off at Kivior. I do think it was a foul, but I also think as a centre-back, you've got to be standing up and continuing to play there. And that just kind of opened the floodgates then. And then the second and third goal, both of them, we just gifted to them. It was so frustrating. Like Brighton they deserved the win, but I don't know if they earned it. Does that make sense? I feel like we kind of still handed it to them. The second goal, Trossard, just giving it straight to the Brighton player. And then the third one, our heads were down, we were gone. But I think the turning point of this actually wasn't really the players. It was the substitutions that Arteta made. I think taking off Xhaka and Jorginho at the same time is such a ballsy, like balls to the wall, let's just attack move, that we lost what little control we had in the midfield at that point. And then Brighton, like Caicedo was just unstoppable. He's just incredible. McAllister, whoever gets him, is getting a hell of a player. But the second we took Xhaka and Jorginho off, I thought the game was done. So I think Arteta has apologized to the fans and said, this isn't good enough. It's our fault. But I think it wasn't just the players on the pitch. He kind of holds a bit of this L. I'm going to go to you, Dev, first, and I'll go to you, Adam. Dev, what did you enjoy watching Arsenal? Did you enjoy that?
It's all right to say by the way. Part of me. It was more just because, and this is where I don't want to generalize and say Arsenal fans think this, Arsenal fans think that, because I have a very small bubble on Twitter that tell me and all my friends that inform my opinion of Arsenal fans, which isn't fair. But I do think that there was an element of humbling about it. It was a bit, and I kind of want to just make it clear that, yes, at the beginning of the season, if you'd have said you'd chase Man City right to the end and, nearly go on to win it, you'd say that was a great season. But I look at it and I think, everyone's talking about injuries and things. I can't have the injury talk when I'm a United fan and we've dealt with what we've had to deal with. And I think, you've lost some key players and I understand that. I think what was really weird about it for me is that there was just the one thing I aligned Arsenal with was fight and a really good mentality and a really good this. I don't think you have many leaders in the team. I don't think you can call a Zinchenko or a Saliba a leader. They've only done it for one season. That doesn't make you a leader. Xhaka is the type of player you look up to, but he throws the captain's armband down and I still haven't gotten over that. So I do think there's bits of it where you just sort of gave up, and that was disappointing to see, because I don't think any Premier League footballer should give up ever, and United have done it a few times this season even, so I was a bit disappointed with that. But it was a part of me that was like, okay, you kind of have to accept that when you're on top of the league for over 200 days and you are the front runners and you've got nothing, I think the fact you've got nothing else on and nothing else to play for, and then you let it slip. It's a tough one to swallow because I've done it like in 2012 with the Aguero moment. We should have won that season. There's a few times where we should have won it and we didn't. Newcastle slipped up in the 90s and we came on and won that. But there's loads of elements of it, but you kind of just have to accept the other. This is probably statistically the worst one, and it's a hard one to take, but it's one that it's football. It happens, and it's a choke. I don't like the term bottling it. I think it's a bit of an unfair phrase, but it is a choke. You know, you got to the end, you stumbled, and it's human. But you've got some good foundations to lean on for next season, and you got the right manager, you got the right backroom staff, you've got the right sort of young players as well that are just going to grow. So provided you can get through this bit with a good summer, I think you're in a good place. But focus on the Champions League now. It's the first time in 6 years you've been there. So
it feels,
enjoy that.
Yeah, I tell you what, watching Man City, Real Madrid, I was absolutely crapping myself. I was like, we're not in the Europa League anymore. We've got to play Champions League football. It's terrifying. No, I think most of what you said there was fairly fair. I think the injuries, we have had 7 first-team players out over sustained periods across the season. I think we've only played our first 11 like a handful of times, which has made a difference. But I think the only injuries we can really point to and say that made a difference are Zinchenko and Saliba. Like Gabriel Jesus was out and we continued and we're still top. Like he didn't make that big a difference. I think Zinchenko yesterday, we saw that we were missing him. I think Tierney's better defensively, but we just lose all control in the midfield. And Saliba, I love Kivior, but Saliba for me is one of the best centre-backs in one of the best young centre-backs in world football. Of course you can't replace him. Like it's impossible to replace him. So I think injuries have had their part, but I think you're right. I've been disappointed by how some of the older players have reacted. And I think the fact that Ødegaard has become the leader at 23 says a lot about him, but says a lot about some of the players that are around him as well. So I think it's really...
Where was Partey? Like I didn't see him for the last 4-5 weeks, really.
Because he's been absolutely atrocious. For me, he shouldn't have even been in the team from the first game of the season. Anyway, I would have just suspended him and had him gone. No interest in the bloke. It's annoyed me that we've played him the whole season. Adam will tell you, I've ranted about it a few times, that we've resorted to playing him. I did have a theory that it was karma that his form disappeared the second it mattered. But I'm glad he's not been in the team, and I wouldn't. I think he's going to be sold maybe to Turkey this year. I can see him getting shipped off somewhere. But I'm glad the bloke's not about. But we do, Brighton fans are going to be screaming because we have just given them zero credit. And Adam, I'm going to go for you. How impressed were you with Brighton? And just Roberto De Zerbi, we keep banging the drum on this pod, but he is one of the most exciting young coaches in world football at the moment. How impressed are you with how well drilled he's got that team?
Yeah, and I think the difference on this game was they were just a bit more clinical. They were just, I think what we've been used to is like exciting football with De Zerbi in a way they kind of are well drilled. But I think the difference in this particular game was how they took their chances. They weren't necessarily toying with you as much. They kept a lot of the possession, but they weren't necessarily doing too much or anything different or extravagant in that style of football. It was more that they took their chances when they needed to. As we alluded to on the first one, Kivior should do better. But then in the second and third goals, they were just kind of signs of like how much better they are getting at that kind of final third. And that's something that De Zerbi is getting the most out of, those attacking style players. We talked about the likes of Mitoma and Solly March, and, De Zerbi set them a target of like, you need to contribute at least 10 goals. And they hadn't scored that in this time at like Brighton. So that kind of shows you the story of De Zerbi. But I think they've got really solid foundation. I mean, it'll be interesting what happens with Levi Colwill as well, because obviously he's supposed to go back to Chelsea. Do Chelsea bring him back? I mean, they would be stupid not to like keep him there, to be fair, based on his form. But yeah, I mean, so many promising signs about Brighton. I mean, I think I saw a tweet from, I think it's Kieran Maguire, the man that does the price of football. And he talks about the fact if you told them that they would go to Liverpool and beat them twice this season, Arsenal twice, etc., they would have bitten your head off. Like, that isn't going to be achieved quite easily, and they've done it. They've gone out of their way, and that's under 2 managers. And that's the other thing, they've made it seem so seamless. It's not about the managers necessarily. It's about the setup that they've got at the club. So they do a fantastic job. Tony Bloom, he's put the foundations there. So it doesn't matter who kind of goes, even when it comes to players. We forget about Moepo. He was supposed to be this incredible player for this season. Unfortunately, he had to retire, but they've made it look so seamless. And then you've got this new Italian kid, Bonetti. He looks incredible already from that appearance against Nottingham Forest. So I'm really excited about like Brighton next season. I'm just hoping they can get a bit more of a clinical striker, whether that be even Ferguson or whether that's Undav. I don't know. I think there's still a few question marks about Undav, but I like his song that the Brighton fans chant. So full of praise for Brighton and De Zerbi. We know about De Zerbi. So long may it continue. I think whoever snaps him up is in for a treat, because I think that next step is where he'll try and get that kind of Pochettino kind of vibes. Maybe if he gets a chance, I think he could do some miraculous stuff. So
every paper in Italy at the moment is linking him to the Milan job. Every club in Italy that's got managerial problems now, it's like, De Zerbi? Anybody want De Zerbi? He's getting linked everywhere. It's kind of understandable. But even players like Enciso just turns up and just bags against Liverpool and Arsenal. Like, where do you keep finding these people? I don't understand. It's infuriating. Dev, how much have you enjoyed Brighton this season? I think they've definitely been the story of the season, right?
Yeah, I would say they're the best run club in the top leagues in Europe, because I don't think there's any other team that I can look at in the Premier League. Maybe Brentford. I think if we look further afield, can we say Napoli, or are they just running on form? I don't know. It's difficult, but I think with them, it is a case of exactly who's there to do what job, whether that's on the pitch or off it. And you can't say that about most top clubs. I can't even say that about Arsenal, about who necessarily says yes or no. And they've been one of the best teams this year. And City, you can tell, obviously, Guardiola, and they've got the ex-Barcelona tiki-taka lot in the back room, but no one really knows who pulls the trigger on transfers. But there, exactly who it is. And even though they lost Dan Ashworth, I believe his name was, they lost him to Newcastle, their sporting director. Everyone thought that all of the good stuff about Brighton would kind of go to Newcastle, but actually Newcastle have recruited well, as you expect them to, and they've been a bit of a story themselves, but you expect it with the money. And yet Brighton, if I was smart and if I was in any club that had good finances about them, I would just look at what Brighton are doing and copy them in the next transfer. If they're linked with anyone, I would just give them straight away. And I look at United and I think we've got about 5 or 6 top young players coming through now. I would say I would call up De Zerbi and be like, do you want Pellistri on loan? Do you want this person on loan? Like, develop our players. But then we were talking just then about strikers. They've already signed or confirmed Joao Pedro, haven't they, for 30 odd million from Watford. And I've wanted him for about 3 years. I think he's a top quality striker, and I say, we'll see in the Prem. He'll do well now because he's at Brighton, so we'll see how good he is. But I just think, they are the best run club, arguably in the world, definitely in the league. And if anyone has any nous about them, they would quite respectfully copy what they're doing, because it's the model for success. And if they did spend more, and if they did it over a certain time, Europe could only just be the beginning. And I really hope they make it. I think they deserve to make Europe this year. And they're just a nice club, so more power to them, really. They're just really nice club.
Exactly.
Really likeable.
Yeah, and they do play incredible football, and any Brighton game I will sit and watch and enjoy. So I think, get them in the Europa League, get them in the Conference League. It'll be fantastic. We do have a question in from Mon Sportif. Hello, boys. Saying, question, guys, does De Zerbi's success in the Premier League come as a surprise? Adam, I'm going to let you give your view first before I answer. What do we think? Are you surprised by his success?
Not surprised at how well he's adapted to it, because I think he was going to, put his spin on it, but there's already a good foundation. They obviously started off quite well under Potter, and a lot of Brighton fans allude to the fact that actually Potter didn't do too much, to be fair. It was the players that did it ultimately at the end of the day, but he certainly got them a bit more clinical in that final third. I feel like they've got a really good blend. We're talking about the players, the quality and depth. Not surprised. I think it'll be interesting coming into the summer where we're talking about the likes of McAllister, Casado might move on. So it'll be interesting to see what type of player he then brings in and then could fill in that gap. I mean, I've heard a lot of rumours about the likes of James Milner, for example, coming in to do
that's
Swan Song.
basically done now, I think, right?
It feels like it. So it feels like he's going to put a bit of blend of experience alongside maybe some younger heads. I know about the Pole Kasper Kozlowski, who they bought off the back of the last Euros, and he's a player that obviously takes an interest for me because of the Polish heritage, and I look forward to seeing him again in the Premier League. But that's just kind of their model. They seem to grab these talents without anyone really noticing about them and then just kind of bring them into the squad, and they seem to just fit in nicely. So, yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how De Zerbi kind of brings his own spin on it, because I think largely a lot of that's been influenced by the structure, but whether De Zerbi gets his own twist will be the big thing. So looking ahead, I'm fascinated by that, but yeah, not surprised by how well De Zerbi's kind of adapted to this Brighton side.
No, well, I think if you look at his Sassuolo team and how well he did with Sassuolo, who are they're a club that also bring in young players, develop them, sell them on. It's kind of a similar, not to the same degree of success, arguably, but it's the same kind of ethos and philosophy, play attractive football. He got 2 8th place finishes and an 11th place finish with Sassuolo. That's also straight out of Serie B, I think, as well. And it was one of the best performances from a Serie B team in Serie A. So it doesn't surprise me, because they are two very similar clubs, and he's obviously a very good coach, both defensively and offensively. My only request is that he brings Berardi to the Premier League. I just want him to buy Berardi from Sassuolo. I want to see him in the Premier League for 2 years. I reckon he'd absolutely kill it. But Dev, have you been surprised by De Zerbi?
Oh, I mean, I've watched, weirdly, the first ever game I watched at San Siro was AC Milan versus Sassuolo a few years back. And looking back, it was De Zerbi who was the manager. And I watched it and I thought it was a boring game. It was 0-0. Like, I think Sassuolo had a goal ruled out by VAR. But I remember watching it and I just thought I couldn't tell which player was playing in what position. And that was a bit of a confusing thing for me. I didn't know if it was a right back getting forward or the right winger covering. Like, they're very fluid in their in their counter attack in particular. So I am surprised, because I just didn't expect someone to come in. I didn't know that much about him, and I didn't expect someone relatively unknown to come to the Premier League with Brighton and vouch for Europe. Like, I didn't expect that. But then Brighton, I don't expect them to get it wrong. So at the same time, I was like, them going for someone like that when they were linked with big names or bigger names. I know Ollie was being tagged with the job at the time, and I just thought, that would have been a good shout. But then they come and get this guy who just bought into it properly, and they bought into him, which was brilliant to see. And then I didn't think they'd miss any of their big sales. Like Cucurella, I didn't rate him that much. I didn't think he would be that much of a miss. But losing Mwepu for me I thought was going to be a big mental drain on them, to have a friend lose him to retirement and then see where that will go, because we've seen what happens when stuff like that hits the fan. Like, we remember Eduardo at Arsenal. I could think of quite a few at United. So that I'm surprised with, but with him, long may it continue, like I say, but I didn't expect it to be as good as what he is. But it's been brilliant to watch. Like I say, they're like my second team in the Prem, because they're just brilliant to watch. So I love them. But yeah, it was a surprise. It was a big surprise for me.
Absolutely love it. Just keep going, De Zerbi. Keep going, De Zerbi. Don't leave for the big job just yet. You got a few years at Brighton. I hope a few years left. Elsewhere in the Premier League, I think I'm gonna treat myself, and we're gonna go to Villa Park. Aston Villa 2, Spurs 1. Harry Kane now holds the record for the most pointless goals scored in the Premier League, as he gets another consolation. Absolutely played off the park here, I think, by Villa. Again, Unai Emery continues to impress. Another manager that I think people were surprised, are now surprised by how well he's done coming in mid-season. But I think Aston Villa were absolutely ruthless here and rampant. The atmosphere down at Villa Park looks incredible. Jacob Ramsey getting another goal. And another team throwing their hat into the European race. Dev, I'm going to go to you first. Do you think Villa can make it? And what did you think of their performance in this game?
Yeah, I think especially under Gerrard, but definitely at the beginning of the season they underplayed. They didn't really play at the level that they should have been because their squad has always been capable of what Emery has coaxed out of them. I didn't expect him to come in and it to flip on its head so quickly, and I believe it flipped when they battered us 3-1 at Villa Park as well. So I can't really talk about Villa. I know we've beaten them since, but you've got a World Cup winning goalkeeper. You've got like Coutinho doesn't play. God, I can't believe he doesn't play. But then you've got Buendia, you've got Ollie Watkins, solid Prem striker, Leon Bailey, brilliant Bundesliga winger. Like you do have some good building blocks there. So, and Emery just seems to have a knack of building or getting the most out of the team that he's got. He's not really a squad builder. He wasn't at Villarreal. Arsenal was a bit of a teething problem with him at Arsenal, but like they were always. He could always bring the most out of certain players. And I think you could see with Jacob Ramsey, you've got a young kid who is just free and he's just letting him be free. We don't know what his best position is. I don't even think he knows what his best position is, which is always a bit of a fun one to have. But Ollie Watkins, I think this year, I can't remember what the stretch was, maybe 7 or 8 games scoring consecutively. But his movement, his intelligence, I just think you've now got the building blocks of a very, very kind of thoughtful squad at Villa. And I do want to reserve my judgment until I see him in a transfer window. That's the one thing I do want to see, because I think that's where we've seen him fall off in the Premier League before. And we need to see where if they get to Europe, I have no problem that Villa would do well, because I, of all people, should know, having lost a 20-man shootout, that he's very good in Europe. So he will do well. But I think, we need to wait for him to get a transfer window and see where he goes. But Villa had perennially played under where they should have been. I think we're just seeing where they should be now. So it's expected with the recruitment they made in the summer. I think that I put them in one of the best windows of the transfer window, really. I know Diego Carlos got injured, but they brought some really good players in. And now we're seeing the best of them. So that doesn't surprise me. But I still would vote Brighton to get into Europe ahead of Aston Villa. Because Aston Villa still got Liverpool, the bit of a tougher run in. I know Brighton technically got Man City, but if they win the league by then and they've got a Champions League final, who knows? There's all that to play into. But they've been good, but I expect it. I expected him more from Villa than I did from Brighton, I have to say.
Nice. Yeah, it is great to see them doing so well. And I think like even players like John McGinn looks reborn in midfield. He looks like the John McGinn that first came into the Premier League. I think Kamara in midfield is a great player. They've
Douglas
got a lot
Luiz was very good as well.
Douglas Luiz. And I wish Arsenal had bought him, honestly.
Yeah.
That free kick was quality as well. But I think, and they've been linked with Pau Torres. I think the first signing that Emery's looking at making, and if they got, I think I put it on our Twitter, but if they had Pau Torres and Diego Carlos as centre backs, I think that's a pretty good partnership. That is some very good building blocks. But Adam, we're going to talk Spurs. Completely toothless again. I can't speak about them this week without sounding smug or sour. So I'm going to let you talk about Spurs. What was your impression of their performance?
I don't know if there's any words to describe like what Spurs are at the moment, because they just seem lost. They seem really lost. It's like the analogy that I keep on giving, which is they're still in that escape room, but they can't escape it. Basically, they just don't know what to do with this squad. And I don't know where you go. Even Ryan Mason's like, he's just there for caretaker's sake. He's not there to kind of lead it. So it's just more around, if you talk about philosophies, we talked about how well Brighton are run as a club. You got the opposite with Spurs. You got Daniel Levy doesn't know what to do. You've got certain players that are going into the last year of their contracts, like Harry Kane, for example. That's going to be quite messy, whether that be this summer or next summer. Just lost. I don't know what you do with this squad. I mean, I was speaking to a friend about it, and it's like, do they just go back to Graham Potter and ask him if he would consider it? Because it feels like they're going down that list again, doesn't it? 20 managers deep. We might get Nuno Gomez back. I don't know. It'd be horrendous. But I mean, in terms of performance, they just looks. I mean, I know they pressured. They had their opportunities. Kane should have possibly scored a few more. He had that one-on-one chance where it was Højbjerg put the pressure on. I think it was Konsa at the time, got the ball, and Kane should do better. But if it wasn't for Kane diving and getting that penalty, I don't know if they actually get anything out of this match. This is the thing. Just they look so bad at the back as well, just defensively. I mean, there's rumours that Lloris is going to Saudi Arabia already. So it's just a car crash of a club, right?
Yeah, I'd like, not to sound rude, but it probably will sound rude. I'd be really sad if I was a Spurs fan at the minute, just because everything
always, mate, always
is going
it's
wrong.
always like that.
Because I look at when United had Ranić, and I thought this is the worst that it could possibly be. But you'd always knew we were United, and we straight away got Ten Hag, and we were like, we're sorting it out. This season's a rundown. Sorry, just deal with it for now, and then we'll get Ranić.
I promise it'll get better. Yeah,
and it'll be fine. And then Ten Hag has done an incredible job. But if I was at a club that is probably got the best stadium in the UK, and it's definitely, I wouldn't call them a big club, really. I wouldn't call Spurs a big club. I think they're a good sized club. They're not big, but I think if I was at a decent sized club with a decent name, some very good players have played for them in their lifetime, are very good players, and they had to go down a list and keep on getting publicly rejected by every good manager on the market, sometimes twice. Like, I think this is the third time Nagelsmann has said no. And then you've got Levy, who won't put the right money behind the right manager. He keeps on going down the wrong path. And then you've got Kane probably leaving on a free in a year because he's not going to sign an extension. You've got Lloris, probably the worst keeper in the league for the last 2 seasons, going to Saudi. They haven't got a backup. Then you've got 2 of the worst right backs in the league, probably the worst left back. Centre back, I don't know what the pairing is. Romero's overrated. No midfield. Son's misfiring, and Kulusevski looks like he wants to leave as well. He's linked with Milan. I wouldn't know what to think of it. And it is really, because I think what they need, and if they did it, I think they'd be successful, is a reset. Just go down a philosophy, back a manager, and move on. Do an Arteta at Arsenal and move on, even if it takes 2 to 3 years. Because you guys went, what, 8th, 5th, and then 2nd? Like, it takes time. But if I was a Spurs fan, I'd want that. But knowing Levy, he won't give them that. And that's really sad. Because a club, even though I don't like them per se, but I wouldn't want a club to be run in a terrible way, because there are people who put their heart and souls into this club. But it's just, it purely for vanity's sake. This guy thinks that his wrong decisions are always right, and he needs to be told otherwise, but he doesn't believe it. And I'd feel really sad if I were them at the minute, because it is.
I would too. It's something that just, I know Arsenal fans always make the joke about it, but it's just like, well, it could always be worse. You could be Spurs. It could always be worse.
It's only Spurs.
It could always be worse. But yeah, it just feels like at the minute, if Kane doesn't do anything, nobody does anything. And I just think that man must be tired of just pushing that rock up that hill endlessly. Like, it just, if he does nothing, the team does nothing. And you're right, like, even Kulusevski did look disinterested. A lot of the players did, but we're going to leave that one there for now, and we're going to very quickly go down to the bottom of the league, where Leeds were conceding a lot of goals. Now, they've not won yet, but they have kind of tightened up at the back, only conceding 2 to Man City, and now shooting themselves in the foot twice, giving away 2 penalties to Newcastle, which is still very Leeds. But I think a much improved performance. Adam, what did you think of Leeds' performance here? We're going to talk about Bamford as well, but what did you think of Leeds' performance?
Yeah, I was going to allude to him, but yeah, it seems like a bit more of a solid foundation. They kind of understood where they went wrong in the last game against Man City. You could see like Sam pulling his hair out a few times in that match, and this time it seems a bit more sure. They seem to understand where they've got to go, and certainly you seem to get a bit more kind of considered approach in terms of attack as well, because I mean, we associate Sam Allardyce to be hoofball, where's Kevin Davis, get the knockdowns and then just kind of go on to that, but he doesn't have that luxury to play with now, so he's got to work with the players there, and they did quite admirably, I feel. They put it into Newcastle's areas where they didn't expect it, I suppose, at times as well. And I think they've got a good set of players. That's the thing with Leeds. They just need just a bit more guidance, a bit more kind of tightening up at the back. And it seems for an extent, I mean, if you take away those 2 penalties, actually, it wasn't much in the way of Newcastle attacks, was there really? So if it wasn't for that, then they could have got away with maybe more than just a point. But yeah, Junior Firpo, I don't know what the hell that kid was doing, basically. I mean, he gets a penalty at one end, then concedes, and then does something really stupid at the end. So, I mean, that guy. It's unfortunate, isn't it? But I mean, this is the problem with Leeds.
Is
They
it
haven't got enough
unfortunate?
games.
It's the highest handball I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
like his arm
really
is so up in the air. I don't know what he's doing. Like,
yeah, no, I'm not referring to how unfortunate that is. I'm just
okay,
unfortunate that they've got Firpo. That's more to the point.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean that's the thing. So if it wasn't for that, but like I alluded to, there's not enough games now. They're going into this really tight. They're going to need to at least get points now. We're not talking just draws. We're talking about actual wins because, I mean, it's getting so tight at that bottom. And I appreciate as we speak right now, Leicester City are losing 2-0 to Liverpool. So that gives them a bit more breathing space. But you kind of think now Everton and Nottingham Forest have got the edge over them. So it's massive. It's going to go by game basis, isn't it now? And I'm looking at the next two fixtures. So away to West Ham and then last day of the season at home to Spurs. So big ask.
Yeah,
3 points
against Spurs. Yeah,
there's guaranteed 3 points there. That's for sure. Yeah.
But the key moment in this game as well, I think, was Patrick Bamford. Right when he stepped up to take that penalty, nobody in the stadium, including Patrick Bamford, thought he was going to score that penalty. I've never seen a man look less confident. Dev, do you think the greatest achievement of Bielsa's career is getting Patrick Bamford an England cap? Because I think that might be the greatest achievement of his career.
Yeah, I mean, discovering Messi at Newell's Old Boys, that pales in significance. But Leeds are a funny one because one day they can look incredible, the next day they look horrible. I don't think there's anyone that has as much of a dichotomy as Leeds do. They're really, really poor. But I think even if in the short term, let's say they get out and they somehow are able to stay in the league, I think the issue that they're going to have is they've done something which has ostracized quite a lot of their good players. So they brought Grazia in, who is naturally a very defensive coach, and he was bad at it. And then they brought in Sam Allardyce, who I think it was Dougie Critchley from he's on Football Daily and he's been on Sky a few times, and he made a really good point where Sam started saying all of these horrible things in the media, saying, I'm just as good as Pep and Arteta and all these idiotic things. It was a time for Leeds to actually be under the radar and try and coax something out of them, like he'd done at Blackburn and Newcastle for the first time, and with Bolton. Like, that was a time to do that. And instead he chose that moment to bring all of the attention onto Leeds and kind of everyone wanting Leeds to get shown up. So when they didn't against Man City, I think they gave a good account of themselves against City. I think it was 2-1 in the end with the last 2-1, kind of squeaky bum moments. But I think in the last couple of games, you can see that he's favoriting players not based on anything other than the experience they have on their CV. And Joel Robles, as much as I don't want to talk ill of a goalkeeper, the guy, he has no demonstrated experience of actually being a good goalkeeper. He's always been a number 2 everywhere, and you think that's good enough to be a number 1. I don't understand that. Why not get your arm around Meslier and say, look, we back you, we believe in you, keep doing your thing, go forward. Why not put the same arm around Nonto and the same arm around some of your other players? And instead you go and say, no, Jack Harrison, you're my man, you need to do everything. And Bamford, just chest it and go left, don't do anything else. Give it a run if you can, and then we'll see. But Bamford's not a Premier League quality striker. I think we can all accept that. And he's found his level, and it's still a good level, but it's not Premier League. And so I just think the issue is now they're going to go into a transfer window where if they get relegated, they'll sell off all their big players anyway. But if they stay in the league, why would Nonto, who's been linked with some very big clubs, why would he and some of their other, like Llorente and Meslier, why would they all stay if they're just going to be under a manager who wants Andros Townsend until the end of the season and all this? I just think they've done the wrong thing, and they've thought short term. And the issue there lies with Radrizzani and it lies with Victor Orta, because you can't explain that away. So I feel for them a bit, but I just know even if they stay up, I think it's just the beginning of Leeds' problems, especially if Sam Allardyce stays. And that'll be a problem. So we'll see. As a United fan, I couldn't care less if they go down. I'm absolutely fine if they go down. Give us Nonto on your way, and I think you're fine. But yeah, I'd still I wouldn't get excited that much if they were to stay up, because I think we're just delaying the inevitable if they keep going down this Watford route, which they're starting to look like now. And they need to be careful, Leeds. They really do.
Yeah, I think, well, relegation could be a huge disaster for them. But I was saying the very same to an Everton fan this weekend. I was like, if you don't get relegated this year, it'll happen next year. I feel like it's the same with Leeds. Like, if you avoid it this year, it's coming for you next year. Don't worry. But we are going to leave the Premier League there for now. I think that's all the games we wanted to cover. So we are going to come back with the Italian section right after this. Ciao, come stai? Benvenuti. Welcome to the Serie A review. It's time to talk some calcio, and there's been a lot of talking points this weekend. Lots to cover. Milan looking a little bit creaky heading into the derby. Inter kicking on. It can only mean one thing: Milan are going to win 3-0 and Inter go out. That's what it means, I think. But Adam, where are we going to start in Serie A?
Should we start off with Milan? Because I feel this is a fascinating story, because you've got both Milan clubs failing to win in Spezia. But more importantly, I think this was a massive 3 points for Spezia as well. I think that gets lost amongst the scenes that we know we're going to kind of have on our kind of walls, where it's basically Curvas meeting Tomori and co, who are shitting themselves, as we said offline, basically. The backdrop was we didn't know what sides Pioli would play, because, you know, going into Champions League match, you were expecting maybe him to rotate it. He didn't really rotate it if you look at the squad lineups, and it's very fascinating to see how well kind of Spezia took it to them, especially, you know, set play. Wisniewski scores from there, and then incredible free kick from Esposito. I mean, that was beautiful. If that was another player, another team, you'd be talking and raving for it for a long time. But yeah, I mean, this Milan squad, again, we just don't know what you're going to get. It's so inconsistent this season. They kind of showed shades of what they can do against Napoli in the Champions League, for example, and the league. That was the side that we saw last season. But this time, even when you're looking at the centre-back lineup, so you got Chiar, Tomori, Kalulu, they're all struggling. They're all struggling. They're struggling. And I don't know if it's a formation that's really screwing with their heads at the moment. You know, there's certain personnel. Okay, Leao's not there, so they've got Origi on that left-hand side. Doesn't kind of work in the same sense. They're just a bit lost. They seem just lost with it. And, you know, they started off quite brightly in this game. Tonali had a shot from distance, hits the post. If that goes in, probably a different game. You're kind of thinking, right, they could score one more, that wraps it up, and that's normally enough. But on this occasion, it is just about that grit sometimes in this league. It's all about who's got the better grit and who can grab hold of the ball, second balls sometimes as well. And that's what it takes. And Milan just struggling even with the basics. I mean, just there's a lack of inspiration up top as well. I think Giroud is a bit tired now.
I was going to say this. I think I was watching the performance, and I'll go to you in a second, Deb. But I was watching the performance, and I was thinking, because Milan did have a lot of chances. I thought if they just had a decent striker, they'd be 3-4-0 up here. They've just not got a striker who's there to put it in the back of the net. Like, Giroud is a scorer of beautiful goals. He's a scorer of big goals, but Arsenal fans will tell you, he never got a lot of goals, right? No. He did go on long stretches of doing sod all, ask Mesut Ozil. I'm pretty sure he still ignores his phone calls. So I did think that Milan, if they had that big striker, if they did go out and get the Vlahovic rather than Juventus or whatever it was, that they would be in a completely different shape. Like, how do you feel about this team, Dev, and their form at the minute? We need to talk about the centre-backs as well. But
yeah, to be honest, you talk about the strikers. I mean, you can't talk about Milan and not talk about great strikers. You can look at a team consistently, era after era, of having that one incredible striker for a long period of time. That's always been a central focus, whether that be Van Basten, Weah, Sheva. They would always have that one and sort of rely on it. And in Serie A, you can kind of rely on the one striker because you just need someone who's physical, who's, you know, confident and can has a bit of a range about them. And there's two areas of that which Giroud doesn't have. He doesn't have a range, and he's not all that physical, really. You think he's well built, but does he muscle people off? Does he breeze past them? No, he doesn't. So I do think in terms of their squad, there's just a mismatch all over the park. The two centre backs, I like Thior, like Malik Thior. You could say if he, you know, played a bit more, then maybe, you know, that would be a good shout. But when you look at Kier, his best years are behind him, really, with Simon Kjaer.
Yeah.
Tamori, very good, like up and coming centre back, but still kind of up and coming. He still has got a lot to learn, and he needs to lean on Kjaer for that learning thing, which Kjaer doesn't really do. Kjaer I've been surprised about, because he's Danish captain, and you expect a bit more from him in order to do that. Or even if he's not captain, he does play a massive role in those key moments, but he doesn't really dig Tamori out. If anything, he relies on Tamori and his recovery pace to dig him out. So that's a big issue. And then you look at their fullbacks. I mean, Teo Hernandez, he's probably one of the most consistent players over the last few years, definitely since, from what I've seen, very good left back. But then you get to midfield, and you never know who's going to do which role except Tonali. You know that Tonali will be there in the fake Pirlo role and, try and play make as much as he can. But is it going to be Salamakers? Is it going to be Diaz? Who is it going to be? Messias? Is it who's going to be the one to progress the ball from Tonali to Giroud? There's no one there to do it. And then Giroud has to dive in, and then the wingers don't bomb forward. It's well, then you get stuck in purgatory between the second and third line, which Milan always do. So that's why I was shocked against Napoli, where not only did they set up their low block very well, but they counterattacked incredibly, and they relied on Leao a lot, but they counterattacked very impressively against them, where it could have been worse for Napoli, really. They had a really good few chances. But then against Spezia, we were saying, you get them against the low block, and that's when we get onto Pioli, where all great managers have a plan B, C, D for all of these different occasions. And I can only put Pep and all the great ones have that C, D, sometimes E and F. Pioli has a plan A, and if plan A doesn't work, he just lets the game drift on, and he always replaces like for like. He rarely ever takes off someone and changes formation midway through. He's not very vocal with it either, and he's not daring enough to be a Milan manager. I think every Milan manager that I've seen in my lifetime has, even if they get it wrong, they have to have a bit of just what the hell about it, give it a go and see what else. And the Milan fans, and this is where we get onto the cover, that they will always respond to their team trying, and that they've always done that, even if they lose. But then all of a sudden you just bore them to tears, to the point where they're chanting for your head, and you're still not making a change. They're chanting for your players, still not even putting your arm around them and back. You're doing nothing, and you're just making them more and more angry. And if I was a young player and I'm in the biggest club in Italy for me, and if I was in there, even if it wasn't at home, I know this one's away, so they got a bit kind of let off with the amount of the cover that were there. But if you're made to, I don't disagree that they went and did that. I actually think that was a very good thing to do, to go and actually talk to the fans and hear that. I actually think that was fine. But if you're a young player, what does that do to your confidence when you've got the biggest game of your career coming up in 3 days' time? It's the manager needs to take responsibility for that and lead these talks, or be the face of it. When it's all going well, he loves being the face of it. But when it's all going badly, he steps away. And that is a bad mark for a Milan manager. Obviously, we've been quite privileged at Milan to have some of the greatest managers of all time, some of the most braggadocious managers of all time as well, to kind of step up and take the lead. But you cannot be as passive as Pioli has been, and be as naive as he's been, and stay in post. I think if it wasn't for the Champions League, he'd be gone by now. I think we can all accept that. So it's a shame, because Milan are a great club, and I don't like sitting by and watching my two great institutions, United and Milan, just sort of, fall apart. But it's of their own making, and they've got some decent backroom staff now. Hopefully, they've got decent ownership. See what happens after that. But you can't have Maldini on CBS Sports and being revered for the great player that he was, to then represent a manager who doesn't seem to buy into that. And that's, I think, the issue. So I think he has to go. He can't go now because they've also got the biggest game ever. But it's a shame. I feel for them, and I can see the routes that they need to take to get out of it. None of them include Pioli in the dugout. I think his time is gone.
Well, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think he was only ever meant to be a transition manager, but then he won the Scudetto, and they were like, "All right, he's got to stay now." And I think, genuinely, I think they have been planning beyond him for a while. I think because he was meant to be that guy of like, okay, the new owners are in, we're putting building blocks in place, then we'll get someone who takes us there. I think you're right. He won't be in the hot seat next season, I imagine. But I find it really interesting the reaction in England, and I'm going to go to you, Adam, to the ultras talking to the players. Now in Italy, that's it's kind of fairly common. They have the retiros where the chairman send the players off and they can't talk to their family for a month or whatever it is if they're playing badly. Like
De Laurentiis.
There are a lot of these cultural differences, but I like that the ultras are able to get that relationship with the players and be able to call them over and go, "Oi, boys, this isn't good enough." Like in England, you shout, "You're not fit to wear the shirt," and then that's it, right? Like, do you like this kind of culture within Calcio?
I like it because it's different and it's not something that we're used to in the UK. We wouldn't see that, like you allude to. We'd probably say sit down if you think he's shit, basically, or like if you want him gone, basically, right? But normally you wouldn't get that connection between the fans necessarily these days and that kind of squad. You don't see them very often. The most you get is go over there and clap them off, basically. That's as best as you're going to get from a UK kind of coach, kind of trying to make sure that the rapport is there, really. But I think it's a good thing because you need this kind of realization sometimes, especially when you've had a poor run, which Milan have been. And, that's probably their way of kind of saying, look, you've got a massive game coming up on Tuesday night. We really want you to get behind. And I appreciate there's probably more diplomatic words were used than what I'm just kind of saying, but it's more to get that point and feeling that, you haven't really worked your socks off. We really need a performance now. You need to prove, even if you lose, like Dev says, it doesn't matter. As long as you show that you are Milanista, you are one of us, you are on the pitch being us. And I think that's what's been missing. In the first leg, you didn't see that kind of heart. And they followed that by this performance. You can understand why they feel the way they do. And maybe that's what they needed. And I think I was going to also say that game that Milan won this title winning season against Sassuolo on the last day of the season, it was all led by Ibrahimovic, if you noticed that. In the dressing room, it's all about Ibra giving those speeches. Pioli's just there in the background, just taking it all in. And he's not really saying much. And I appreciate sometimes you do need those big players to say what needs to be said. But this is that kind of conviction that we're alluding to, is Pioli hasn't got that. And like Dev said, even tactically, it's just not there. For the big games, even against Inter, he's been found wanting on more than numerous occasions. So it's a big game for not just Pioli, but also Milan. So, let's see what happens.
We do have to always also very quickly say, well done, Spezia. Like, we're not going to have too much time to go into it, but Esposito being an ex-Inter player was quite funny for him to get the second goal, and two players with their first ever Serie A goals as well. Not a good afternoon for the red and black side of Milan. But we're going to go over to the blue and black side of Milan. And I was lucky enough to go into the stadium on Saturday evening. And I'll tell you what, the first half, Inter were absolutely atrocious. And I thought this is going to be a long night. Like, we were right behind the goal and it was just Sassuolo running at us for the first half hour. And I was like, Inter I know it was a bit of a B team. Like, they started Gagliardini, they started Bellanova, they rested a few players. Bastoni didn't play. So they did rest a little bit, but I still thought the level of performance was way below what you'd expect. And I spent the first 40 minutes slagging off Romelu Lukaku and being like, this guy is an absolute cart horse. And then he just scores that goal from nowhere. And it was just the most classic Rom goal to get the ball running, bangs it into the top corner. And then from there, I think Inter really, really improved. I think they were the much better side, but they do have issues defending because both of those Sassuolo goals were the freest headers I've seen in a very long time. I think Handanovic in goal made a big difference. He did make some big saves, but I think if Onana's in goal for some of those crosses, they get caught and they get cut out at source. I think Handanovic wasn't quite able to do that. Two very fortunate own goals, I think, like 2 massive deflections, which definitely helped. But I did like Lukaku's second goal.
Yes.
So, Adam, I'm going to go to you first. What do you think of Inter's performance? Any players that stood out?
I mean, it's hard to say really on this performance because, as you allude to, it's kind of a rested squad. But Brozovic, again, just showing what he can do. I mean, he's been incredible the last few games when he has been playing. But yeah, I think that puts him in the right kind of mentality for this match as well, going into the Champions League game. Belanova, I did rate him. I think he's becoming really much more dependable now. And I think maybe it's just that consistency. Didn't get that run at the early part of this season, and now he's starting to get that kind of faith from Inzaghi, definitely, that he can do a job. And I think the thing that is interesting about him, he can take on his man. That's the difference. Whereas not necessarily could you say that of Darmian, for example. Dumfries is a bit hot and cold sometimes.
He's just chaos, Dumfries. He doesn't know what he's doing.
He doesn't know what he's doing. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you can say that he's doing well. But we've alluded to Lukaku as well. Lukaku is just on his day. He can prove like the form that he did under Conte. He can be a really world-class striker. He's just been too inconsistent, even in Serie A, especially with his injuries. So yeah, not a lot to kind of shout about in this game, but yeah, I think the one story I want to kind of say is I'm still liking the look of Fratesi at the moment. I think he could do a really incredible job for one of the big 6 in Italy. I fancy him at Inter if Inter had the funds, but yeah, I don't know how realistic that is, unfortunately. So yeah, that's probably the summary of this game. That not a lot to shout about, but lots of goals, right?
No, I did really enjoy it. And Belanova, I thought was a really interesting one because he was definitely had a few times where I think the ball slipped under his foot and he lost concentration. And there was a moment where he started screaming at what I think it was Mkhitaryan. I'm not sure. It was one of the more experienced Inter players because he put the ball behind him. And I was like, whoa, man, you need to like slow your roll a little bit. You're like a young lad in this team. But he did show that fight and the aggression, and he did beat his man. He did create a lot. He did hit the shot that ultimately went in. I was quite impressed by him. But I think Sassuolo really did cause Inter so many problems, and to start the game as well as they did. Now, Dev, Sassuolo had a few years post De Zerbi and this year we've been a little bit confused by him. They'll be in Serie A. Do you think they can kick on? They've got those shoots of a decent team again, right?
It depends how many of them they keep, though, because I think Sassuolo are one of them teams where there's a few in Serie A where you look at them and you think, even though they've got some standout players, I'll probably keep them, but Sassuolo don't really have a very good track record of that. And I think I'll be interested, to be honest, I'll be interested to see how many De Zerbi would want to take away from where he is now at Brighton and bring with him from Sassuolo. But it's kind of, for them, I just don't see which players are going to take the responsibility on their shoulders for them. Okay. So there's a few kind of, to be honest, there's a few down there this season that I don't really know who's going to take responsibility. And in the game, I think against Inter, it was a bit more Inter shooting themselves in the foot and not being as clinical as they should have been, because really the game should have been beyond doubt at certain points if they actually were able to progress the ball properly, do the first and second thirds compared to what they were. So they were very sloppy, and hence the scoreline. It was a very, very sloppy scoreline. But I wouldn't be too worried about them. I think Sassuolo have always been kind of happy to be part of the party. I don't think they have many like goals to take them further forward, but I just think the issue that I've got, I mean, I don't like Inter Milan. I've made it clear multiple times I don't like them. But yes, but I did think it could have been a game where, even though they've got an older guard, where you've got a Darmian or you've got a Lukaku or Mkhitaryan, somehow he's trudged himself up from the depths. But there aren't many legs in that team. And I think if there was one thing that Sassuolo could have done is to just be a bit more penetrative moving forward instead of just feeding off the scraps, going for second balls, which is what, from the highlights anyway, it looks like they were doing. So I felt, had they just kind of put their youth to good work against, an organized Inter team with the mature players, they could add a bit more joy. And until they do that, they're probably not going to go much further than a 13th or a 14th place finish. But knowing the very few Sassuolo fans that I know, which is exactly naught, I think they'd all be happy with it. Like, I don't think anyone really cares. So yeah, we'll see. But I think, having lost the Zerbi, losing their manager and then still staying in Serie A, I think that is the goal. I think it always kind of was. And we would like to see some teams disturb the order, but out of all the teams there, Sassuolo aren't going to be the one to do it. So more power to them, and we'll see. But they do need to be a bit more adventurous if they're going to get anything out of a relegation scrap, because that's all I think they're good for, which is really sad to say, but that's all I think they are there for.
Yeah, I think you're right, because under De Zerbi, they did show ambition. They did show that attacking threat, and they got up there. Like 8th is a bloody good finish. That's a very good finish. But there are some, I like Lauriente, but you're right. I don't know how much longer he's going to be there. Fratesi, don't know how much longer he's going to be there. There are a lot of very good players in that squad, but they'll probably get picked off, won't they? But Inter got the win. Bounced into the derby. We're not going to talk about the derby yet. We're going to wait. We've got to wait. We've got to hold the delayed gratification. We're going to wait. And within Serie A, we are now going to go. Adam, you wanted to talk Lecce Lazio on Friday evening. Much more competitive than people expected, I think.
Yeah, and I think it kind of highlights how badly Lazio have come off the rails as well. Because if you remember, they were a few weeks ago, second place. It looked like they were going to cement that. And that would have been an incredible performance in terms of how they kind of see themselves in the league positionings. But yeah, they didn't look their normal selves. I mean, they did take the lead initially through Immobile, but they kind of let Lecce back into this game. And Remy Udin, who's been doing really well for Lecce of late, scores just before half time with quite a tidy finish, to be fair. It's pulled back to him and on the left foot just pegs it into the bottom corner. So, they go into half time at level pegging. And then within 5 minutes of the second half, he's put through and again just takes the lead. So Lecce are holding on pretty much for the duration of that second half. And just unlucky. What happens is just a ball into the box, kind of goes, I can't remember if it was Mobile, heads it, and Vladimir Falcone saves it, and it kind of goes behind him and just goes into the back of the net through Milinkovic-Savic. So it's one of those scrappy goals. Everyone goes crazy, but it kind of shows you the levels of what Lazio, they were hanging on and they were trying to get a result here. And as we look at the table now, they're, between them and Milan, it's like 4 points difference now. So it's getting a bit more tighter now. I mean, if Milan do get their shit together, as we proverbially call it, and do some performances in the league, they might be able to get this spot off Lazio. That would be harsh on Lazio, given the football that they've had under Sarri. They've been probably the best defensively, apart from Napoli, I think it is. Lecce are also one of those teams that are quite tight at the back as well. So I think this is the thing that I want to allude to, though, is Lecce are in this relegation fight with Spezia, with Hellas Verona. Hellas Verona had an opportunity to pull themselves out. They lost to Torino at home. And this week's game, Rory, is Lecce versus Spezia. Big game in that bottom fight now. So they need to win that. I think it's favourable for both Spezia and Lecce in terms of the run-ins, but this is the big game between both. So it depends who's the winner out of this one. It might be a point apiece potentially, but it is a massive game going into this weekend. So yeah, let's see what happens.
Yeah, I was really impressed with that Udin. I thought both those goals were really, really just well-taken goals. Just really, really well taken. But I was absolutely gutted for Strafetta as he put that penalty wide. I think that could have really, really done Lecce a lot of favours. But we've been talking up Lazio, and I don't know how you felt about them this season, Dev, but we were saying that they were comfortably the second-best team in Serie A for a while, but they have properly fallen off. Do you think I've kind of mentioned before that they've got a tiny squad. Do you think that's what it is, or do you think there's other reasons as to why they have just taken this sharp downturn?
You look at their first team squad and you think that's probably second is probably where they should be, because I think that's probably the second best. Juve you can argue, but I'd probably say that's the second best squad in the league, especially considering that they actually work well together. Like they've all played like a good amount of Serie A, played together quite a lot, and they all kind of work. I mean, Immobile, I don't know how old he is now, but he must have been. He feels like he's been there forever. But I think they've got a very good makings of a good squad, but I just think it came down to, it's kind of what we've seen from some of the top four teams in other areas. Like I can compare it to United, where we were so solid and then all of a sudden dropped off with a couple of injuries, a couple of poor performances. But I look at Lazio now with the games they've got left. I can see them here. I think they've got 2 games, Udinese and Empoli, where they're not playing for anything really. They're quite happy mid-table. They might play for a bit of pride, and then they've got Cremonese towards like in the middle of them, who pretty much down and gone. So I'd be surprised if Lazio fell off further. I think they've kind of had their wobble and they'll sustain a bit more of a clearer shot for the top 3 or 4. But it is going to rely on results elsewhere, which, you know, you don't really want to be doing. They should feel a bit like they're chasing their own tail, because I think it's kind of their own fault. You know, they've lost some pretty simple points. I mean, losing to the Milan clubs is obviously a bit of a difficult one, but I remember, was it Torino where they lost 1-0? I think it was. And I just remember looking at that and I thought, that's the kind of game where it can just start to derail you a bit. And I feel like they've lost a lot of confidence ever since then. You don't see the free-flowing Lazio that we've kind of liked a lot of the year. And this was the year to upset the hierarchy and really go for it. And I think they embraced that for the large majority of the year. But I think that squad is broken and we've seen it. Not through the conventional injury route, but I just think they've kind of ducked away, maybe got a bit complacent, might be the word that I'd use to describe Lazio. But now they've got 3 games, which I expect them to win. I expect them to win all the games until the end of the season, and they have to rely on maybe Inter slipping up and a few others kind of giving them a hand. But I expect them to go on and have a very good end to the season. But they have only themselves to blame, in my opinion, which is a bit sad. But there we are. Yeah, I think it's themselves that they've got to look in the mirror and think for next season, in a season where it won't be as fun to watch as probably this season has been, then they're going to look at this as a real big missed opportunity, I think.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's going to be a lot of teams improving in Serie A next year, and it's going to be wide open again. Like the title race is always wide open in this league, and I think it's going to be wide open next year. So Lazio need to be able to improve and build on that squad. But before we wrap up Serie A and go to the Champions League and the Cool Kids Club, Even Cooler Kids Club, we need to give a bit of love to Salernitana as the machine rolls on. Sousa continues with joining the club of managers performing miracles coming mid-season. Now, Adam, he might be my new favourite manager in Serie A. I absolutely love what's happening down there. They score in the last minute. Candreva only scores back. He's never scored a tapper. He only scores screamers, and he gets the win against Atalanta. Does that end Atalanta's European hopes before we talk about Salernitana?
I think this is the thing with Atalanta. You just don't know which side, but I think that is pretty much game, set, and match now, because although they're only a point behind Roma, I expect Roma to get the results. I don't know what to make of this Atalanta squad. Unfortunately, with Gasperini, they kind of lost their way of late, and it doesn't feel like they're getting into a run of form now. So, yeah, unfortunately, it does feel like that. But yeah, kudos to Sousa. Didn't think you could do it after the.
I honestly thought he'd be sacked by now.
I know. Well, David Nicola was there, second time this season. You thought maybe a third time, but no, not this time. Salernitana, he's got the best out of this group of players. I mean, that's the incredible bit. And Suleiman Diaye, the incredible form that he's been just demonstrating. But yeah, like you say, it's the old heads, like, Fazio, for example, Candreva as well. And obviously our favourite goalkeeper, Guillermo Ochoa. I mean, that guy, just bring back the years. He
gives them so much solidity. Honestly, it felt like, and I know Atalanta are they're missing Højlund, right? Obviously, they're missing Højlund, and you could see that big hole. Like Zapata should have scored. I do not know how Zapata didn't score in this game. Muriel had some speculative shots, and I was like, I kind of had to remind myself, talking about how long Immobile has been there. How long have Zapata and Muriel been the attackers for Atalanta? It feels like decades now. I think Højlund was obviously meant to be that player that came in, replaced them, and gave a bit of fresh air. But Zapata, I don't know how he didn't score. But yeah, Salernitana, just an absolutely classic Salernitana performance. Scoring in the 97th minute. They only seem to score in additional time, but just an incredible performance. What are your feelings on Salernitana, Dev? We've got a lot of love for them on this pod, just for the chaos that they cause.
Yeah, I think it might have been a tweet I saw from you guys actually about Salernitana, but I looked at their squad and I actually recognised a lot of their players, which I can't say for a lot of the Serie A teams at that lower end of the table. You showed me Empoli, I have no clue what they look. Who's in that but then you see these guys and you think Ochoa, all right, that's the guy who only shows up for World Cups, so he's not going to do anything for anything else. And then I remember Truce de Kong, he was at Watford just because he was in a YouTube video with Chris MD, so I know who he is purely because of that. And then just looking at the squad now, there's a few in there that I recognise. Tony Valeno, I know was in the the Dutch setup for quite a long time. I think he's gone out of it now. Piatek and Bonazzoli. The only reason I know Bonazzoli is because of FM, but like he was actually a decent player.
He was great on FM as well.
Yeah, very, very good. But like, there's a lot of character, I think, in that squad. If I was to look at it from, because this is me looking at from the outside looking in, I haven't followed him nearly as much as I should have, but from the outside looking in, that is quite a characterful squad, and it takes a bit of a character to pull it all together. And if there's anything that Paulo Sousa is, he is a character. I don't think he's a great. I don't think he's a great manager. I don't think he's a great coach. There's nothing to suggest that he is a top coach. You just have to watch the QPR documentary when he was there to see what kind of coach he was. Even though that was long ago, he still has that same kind of remnants there. But they look like a pretty weird, like ragtag, like bunch of misfits in that squad. But I feel like that's working for them. If
that's why we love them. It just shouldn't be working, but it's working.
They should be relegated, right?
Yeah, probably with this squad. But it is quite nice to see. I think you do get certain teams who always have a bit of a clear group of players that are just constantly at a certain level, whereas these guys, you do have someone capable of a good performance, and that's just seen that unbeaten in 4, which is more than any team in the lower half of the league, which is I think you have to go to Monza in 9th before you match that. So that is very impressive, and I have to say, like, fair play to them. I only know them because of, I think maybe Gattuso was there at some point.
He was good,
So that's the only reason I've heard of them. But to hear that they're still going strong, because a lot of teams back then aren't, good for them. But yeah, other than that, I have nothing else to give. So fair play.
That's honestly completely understandable. It's only that we cover set we have any opinion on them, I think. I did get the random memory this weekend as well when I saw that they won, and it just made me laugh again every time I think about it. When last year they lost 5-0 at home on the last game of the season when they needed to stay up, but the other team lost, and the players were then dancing on the pitch celebrating. Wow. I was like, absolute balls you've got to dance after losing 5. Absolutely love it.
Bit like those Barcelona players at Espanyol, right?
I honestly do not blame those Espanyol fans at all. I'd have been first one there. So, guys, we are going to leave Serie A there because we need to head to Europe. But first, we need to have a quick break. We will see you after this. And here we are. It is time for the European football preview, and we're starting, of course, with the Champions League. I got my customary voice note from Tommy this morning. It's unfortunately not fit for air this time, but he just told me he's not slept in about 3 days with the nerves coming into this game. I think watching the first leg, obviously I didn't get to talk about it. Just unbelievable. What the hell happened there? Everyone was in shock. But somehow knowing Inter and knowing Pats at Inter, being 2-0 up makes it scarier. It does make it scarier because you think when this goes wrong, it's going to be absolutely catastrophic. But of course, we need to start talking about the Milan derby. Dev, we're going to start with AC Milan. How do you feel headed into this game? I know the form hasn't been great. Do you think that speech from the Ultras can kick them into gear? Do you think there'll be a wake-up call?
I think there's going to be a touch of we've got nothing to lose in this game. There's been quite a few instances with these players, because a few of them have been there a while, where they kind of like the underdog feel. I think no one gave them a prayer against Napoli. Like, no one gave them a prayer. And I thought they were going to get absolutely spat on by them. But then they ended up putting a really good account of themselves and just showing a bit of fight and a bit of dog in them. And this time they're going to need to score. That's the only thing I think is problematic, is the fact that Leao is going to play at about 70% when you need him firing on all cylinders. And he's a very inconsistent player. Like, he's a very good one on his day, but went missing in the World Cup. He goes missing occasionally. And this is an instance where he cannot go missing, but I think he might, through real no fault of his own in this case. But, it's a derby, and I want to say, you never know with a derby. And if Milan get that first goal, you really don't know what could happen. That's where you rely on the old heads of Milan to really guide them through and keep them calm. But can Darmian do that? Can Mkhitaryan do that? Can De Vrij? Can Lukaku? I don't back them. If I was an Inter fan and then Milan scored maybe in the first 20 minutes, I'd back Milan to go and win and Inter to go and steer the course. So it's going to be a difficult one. I just think that it can go really one of both ways. Either they get battered or they batter them. There's going to be no in between with this game, and it's going to be a very, very cool watch because we all know what happened in the second leg of a big part of the the quarterfinals back then when they last faced each other in the Champions League. And unless someone throws a flare this time, it's going to go to the wire, and we'll have to see what happens. So, my heart wants to say that Milan can do it, but my heart's got me in trouble plenty of times when it comes to football. So I have to go with my head, and I think, unfortunately, Inter do have enough about them to kind of keep them out and frustrate them and frustrate Pioli to make bad decisions, which I think he's very capable of doing. And without Leao firing, I think that's going to be the nail in their coffin. If Inter get a goal, that's it. There's no way Milan are scoring 4 ever. So yeah, it's going to be difficult, but I have hope. Because it's the hope that
you have to. You have to have hope. That's why we're here, Dev. That's why we're here. You have to have hope.
I have hope. But whoever wins, they're not going to win the actual final, are they? So both of them just enjoy their little time in the sun because it won't last long.
You've jinxed it now.
Honestly, I was in the kebab shop the other night and there was loads of Inter fans and we were chatting and one of them was just like 1-0 in the final, Bastoni in the 87th minute from a corner, and we frustrate the hell out of Man City for 90 minutes. I was like, you know what? I'll take that right now. And I can almost see it. It is going to be an incredibly, incredibly nervous evening in the San Siro tomorrow. I am blessed enough to have a ticket. I submitted my name to my friend yesterday, so my name is on the ticket. It's all ready. But I like Inter, but I wouldn't call myself like a huge supporter, if you know what I mean. And I'm nervous. And I know you're right. If Milan get the first goal, that stadium is going to shit its pants. Yes. And I've seen Inter in knockout games in the Champions League in plenty of occasions. When that stadium gets nervous, that team gets very, very nervous. And they feed off each other. It's the same at the Emirates when it happens. I think it's the same at a lot of stadiums. But when they feel the nerves in the crowd, they really, really shrink. So I think it's important for Inter to get that first goal. But one of the things that I think was the difference in the first leg was the fact that Inter did have those experienced players. The fact that, and we said it before the game, Inzaghi started Dzeko and Mkhitaryan and dropped. He dropped Lautaro and it wasn't Barella, was it? It was one of the younger.
He drops.
Yeah, Lukaku. Sorry, yeah, and that experience. Ultimately, those were two players that absolutely ran the game against Milan, Mkhitaryan and Dzeko. So I think having that experience made the difference. So I think Inter do have the ability to do it. They just need to go into it with a super calm head and just right, we go again. Let's do what we did last time. I honestly couldn't believe what I was seeing when I was watching that game. I think we were all in shock. Like I was in a house full of Inter fans and we were all just stood in shock. Like, wait, is this actually happening? This has to be a prank. Like, what is going on? But it should be an incredible game. I do expect goals. I don't think it's going to be a 0-0. I think there are going to be goals. I think, as you said, Milan have got nothing to lose, and Pioli's kind of playing for his job at this point. So maybe he'll make some brave decisions. Adam, how do you see this one going? Am I going to be heading to Istanbul in a couple of weeks' time? What do you think?
I don't know which way to call it, to be fair. I totally expect Milan to go off from the very first kick, just try and get an early goal. Because you get an early goal, like you say, that crowd starts to put a bit of tension, pressure on the squad to try and scrape it and just get a goal the other side. And if the players don't or lose their composure, that's where it's going to be really telling. And that's going to feed into Milan's hands. But I suspect, based on the experience of the players, the way that Inter have got the form at the moment, and Barella on this form at the moment, he's just incredible. He's just the kind of player that we're talking about, Tonali. You need someone to pass it on. Well, if Barella was there for Milan, that's all they needed. That's all they need. Someone that can just take the ball to the other side of pitch. He'll do all of your running as well. And Bastoni's, as you alluded to, has been in incredible shape right now. Acerbi has been incredible at the back as well. And Onana is going to be in this game as well. So I think he's going to be really critical. I mean, we've seen those performances where they've scraped it against the likes of Porto, Barcelona, for example. Maybe not deserving of those games in particular, but they scraped it. And I expect that's what's going to happen. It could be as simple as Milan score one goal and they just shithouse for 1-0 defeats at home and, and hope the crowd get behind them. So Yeah, I'm just fascinated. I cannot wait for this game. Really,
I cannot tell you how excited I am to go to the stadium. Honestly, literally on Saturday, I was like, I've never looked forward to a Tuesday more in my life. I'm just like, can I just go to the stadium now? This is the biggest game I will have ever attended, like without a doubt. It's the biggest game I've been to, and I'm just super, super, super excited. Hopefully, sorry, Dev, but hopefully I'm driving into Duomo, sat out the back of a boot by about 11 o'clock tomorrow night, because I think that's what might be happening if Inter get there. Tommy already kind of semi has plans, so we'll see what happens. But on the other side of the bracket, we have what was the most terrifyingly good performance of football between Man City and Real Madrid. And this time, Adam, you're going to be in the stadium. What do you expect from this game? How do you see this one going? Do City make it?
I'm expecting this to be a bonkers match, and the kind of rationale is probably this is what they bought Haaland for, right? They wanted him to be on the end of opportunities, chances. Remember the last game where they had loads of chances, but they couldn't get in the back of the net. This is the game that they wanted him for. So it's going to be fascinating to see how he kind of copes with the expected abuse from the centre backs. I mean, it'll be interesting. Obviously, he had a good tussle with Rudiger in the first leg.
Great. That
was so fascinating to see how they played. And you saw the cheeky smile from Haaland as well when he gave it to Rudiger as well. So that's going to be fascinating. But just the way that I feel like Real Madrid felt that was more of a defeat for them in the first leg. You could see when they came off the pitch that they weren't happy. They felt that they could have got a win in this match, and that would have been enough for them. I think that gives them a mental edge. Whereas now they have to go out and get a result. And I think that puts a lot of pressure on them. But they're used to that pressure. That's the funny thing about it. And, you know,
they were born in it. They were shaped.
This is the thing. If Ruben Diaz doesn't slide across before Benzema's at the back post to tap it in, that's the kind of moments we're talking about in this match. This isn't about like literally who can outwit the other. This is all about little moments, because it's all about the players having the right mentality for this match. I'm just hoping personally it doesn't go to penalties, because that means it's a long journey back home for me, especially based in Bucks. Like, that is a hell of a trek from Manchester, and I've got work the next day. But yeah, I cannot wait. That's another game that when it comes to like these kind of semi-finals, there's always one game where you're like, not so keen, but we kind of expect what team to go through. This one, it could be either side. You know, like we're saying with Milan and AC Milan, Real Madrid and Man City, you can't call it. It's so tight, so tight.
Well, I think it's interesting that Haaland was kind of anonymous in the first game. I don't feel like he really showed up at all. And I think a lot of Real Madrid fans would be like, okay, right, we survived one. Now that's out of the way. Let's focus on the next one. Dev, how do you see this one going? Do you think Haaland will back at home? He's going to have a say in it, right? There's no way he doesn't have a say in 180 minutes.
Yeah, I think this is the year that Man City really go and do something special. I think I know that's the thing. I mean, I know that they're technically a City rival. I never grew up thinking City were a rival to United, because I was always, they were there and we were there, and then they got money and they were just the rich kids down the block who got fortunate and did it well. But I've never seen an institution be run so well in all my life. And I look back at a lot of football history. I don't think anyone's ever done it as well as they have. And this is a City side which, you know, we can all do these like-for-like comparisons against certain squads in this, but this is probably the best Premier League team that has ever been. I don't think you can look at one season of Arsenal's Invincibles or United 08. You can look at City over 4 years and they just keep getting better. They have the best manager in the world. They are the best team in the world. They're playing against the biggest team in the world, and that's why you can never rule Real Madrid out. Because I would have said last season, when that same thing happened and then Madrid came back and scored 2 goals in the last minute with Rodrigo scoring a header, like, you'd all think that that's the last thing that could happen. But it hurts to say it, because, well, it doesn't really, because I wasn't alive to see the treble from United. But I think City this year are going to do something that's going to blow ours out the water, because they're not just going to, I feel like when United did it, it was based on magic. No one expected us to do it. We're literally talking about a team where we expect them to win a treble, and that has never happened before. Like Liverpool, the quad, we were laughing and joking. They were never going to do it. Us and the cup quad, never going to do it. But now with these lot, you just think this is the best team in the world and the best Premier League team that I've ever seen. And it kills me to say it, because it's it's not my team, not for the fact that it's City, but it's just, they're so good. And a part of me is really kind of just in awe of them a little bit. I am in awe of Manchester City and what they do, because they are, I know they spend a lot of money, but so do we. They spend it much better than we do, and they just do it all well. And I think it said a lot, specifically with the game coming up. It said a lot in the first game, where the papers and everyone really talked up 2 players in that game: De Bruyne for Manchester City and Camavinga for Real Madrid. So you're talking up a left back who's not a left back; he's a centre mid and can't play left back because of their injuries. And I think Nacho came on and played there for the last few minutes. And then you're there talking about the cam of a team who haven't had a left back all year, and it's just, they had Manuel Akanji playing as a left wing back where he was barely a centre back really for Gladbach, and he's just gone and done a madness all season. So it's dejecting to say, because I really wanted to see a Milan Real Madrid final. That was my hope, because that is a really old school,
it's a historic one, isn't it? It's a historic
one. That's a big final. And Man City Inter, which is probably what it's going to be, is a bit shit, isn't it? So it was a bit of a dead final, but like, I do think Man City have got something special in them, and I think Ancelotti's kind of a cat that's used up his last lives, because one thing Guardiola does is he learns very, very quickly. And this is the first time that he's able to learn while having a plan C, plan D. He didn't have that in the season before, where we all thought if he had a Haaland, he could change his game plan. They rested all their players this weekend and got a massive win, and they're going to be fully fit and rested to go for this game. And at home, that's the annoying thing. It's at home.
If it was away, if it was
the other way, I'd say it's a big difference. But Madrid are special. Look, Madrid are just, they are you think of football, you think of certain clubs, and Real Madrid are one of those clubs. You don't think of City, you think of Real Madrid, and they are just an incredible club. But it's just not going to happen for them. I'm so convinced that City are going to win the treble. I've just resigned myself to knowing that we're going to be the ones that give it to them with the FA Cup, and that is unfortunately how it's going to go. But fair play. I'm just going to well done, City.
They've done
really well.
It's the one thing that's making me feel better about Arsenal. Is like, well, we're up against that team. We can't feel too bad about it. But honestly, Dev, you've just blown my mind and made me feel incredibly old when you said you weren't alive for the United 99 treble win. I now feel
I was alive. Okay. I was two. Yes.
Okay,
I remember it.
That's a little bit better. That's fine. That's a little bit better. Okay, so before we go, we do need to very quickly discuss the Cool Kids Club, where the Europa League kicks off in the semi-finals. We currently have Juventus against Sevilla with a last minute equalizer keeping themselves in the tie, and Roma 1-0 up against Leverkusen. I'm just going to very quickly take your predictions. Adam, who makes the final here?
I am going to say Roma and Sevilla.
Oh, Dev?
Yeah, Roma and Sevilla.
I'm going to go Roma-Juve because I want to see Mourinho against Juventus. I need to see it in the cup final. The world needs it. And then in the even cooler kids club over in the Conference League, we have West Ham 2-1 up against Alkmaar and Fiorentina 2-1 down to Basel at home. Absolutely shit in the bed there. Dev, I'm going to go to you first. Who do you see in the final?
West Ham and Fiorentina.
Adam?
Agree. West Ham and Fiorentina.
It's a full house. It is a full house. West Ham Fiorentina, I think, is going to be the final. Dev, we promised, and we have just enough time. You have released a book called The Conquerors. Yeah. Tell us all about it, where we can get it, and where our viewers can find it, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I've got one here, just in case no one knows.
Look, it's beautiful. Oh, look at the eyebrow, beautiful. Man. You've got the eyebrow on the cover. You can't beat it.
Yeah, I made sure the editors got that, in there straight away. But no, it was really cool. This is my first published work. So I've done one self-published before on Amazon, but this one is the first time a publisher thought I had a good idea and ran with it. But I remember when you're a kid, you always look at clubs and you're just a bit in awe of them. And I remember Man United playing against this Milan team. I think it might have been 2003-04, where Van Nistelrooy himself has come out and said, what was the toughest game you played against? And he
Yeah.
said, God, when Milan had Gattuso, Maldini, Cafu, Stam, and
Nesta.
Nesta, it was impossible. And then I just remember that team, and I always thought that was the goal. That was the golden team for me growing up. So yeah, it was just a shock that no one's written about them before, and even more so that there were 2 preceding eras before that where you had the Immortals under Saki, where obviously Saki wrote about it himself because that's a very Saki thing to do. And then you've got the Invincibles under Capello, more successful than Arsenal's Invincibles, which most people don't. They had 58 games unbeaten. Most people don't remember that. But then I just thought no one's talking about this squad, and it's probably because it wasn't a sustained period of success. It was very much a highs and lows, but they did come out on top. So the Conquerors is my way of adding to that list of big eras and giving them a name of their own, but also just the way it all worked out to lose to Liverpool in that famous Istanbul final, which is great timing because now they're in a semi-final to go to Istanbul. So it'd be great if they made it. But yeah, to lose that game, go through Calciopoli, and then you have the World Cup, kind of a really weird, horrible summer, with a World Cup in Calciopoli. But then to lose all your best players, losing Sheva, losing pretty much everyone, only to then go and play Liverpool again with a worse team, wearing the exact same kit, but this time in the Greek city of Athens, where everyone rises from the ruins and win. And then that same year, do the exact same thing in the Club World Cup and become world champions when no one thought you would. It's just one of the best stories I've ever come across. So yeah, it's available on Amazon, and I'm just very proud to have been the one to be the first one to talk about it, because I thought I'd gotten there too late, but apparently I didn't. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. But yeah, I'm proud of it. So hopefully you guys will enjoy it as well.
Right. Beautiful. Well, Dev, thanks for coming on to the show. We'll definitely be inviting you on again. Been absolutely great. Thanks for coming on, man. So viewers, listeners, everybody, it's time to go. It's time for me to have my tea. So guys, we are going to say goodbye, and we will see you on Friday with our next episode. As always, hit the like and subscribe button down here somewhere. You can find us on Twitter at Italian Anglo Pod. Almost got it wrong again. It's been 3 years. On Instagram at Anglo-Italian Pod. You can find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, everything. We will see you next week. Say bye, guys.
Ciao, ciao.
See you later.
Ciao.